I have the great pleasure of speaking to a true patriot of Johannesburg. I mean, there aren't many left. I'm one of them. My guest is one of them as well. Very few others I know, other than maybe Helen Ziller, who wants to become the mayor of this country. But JozivsJozi, or can I just call you Josie, if that's fine? Welcome to the show. What a pleasure to have you.
Roman, it's an absolute pleasure, and thanks for those kind words and patriotism. Yeah, looking forward to our conversation, man.
So, I mean, when I saw you click my link and book, I was like, oh my word, this is like big time, right? I mean, the account has 140,000 followers, and how you came to prominence was you showed pictures in Joburg from 10, 15 years ago to the present day. So the same street corner 15 years ago to the street corner today. And that's where I already thought, oh, wait, the degradation is actually way more than even I suspected. Because I go around Joburg fairly often. Obviously, I don't sort of live in the areas that you highlighted. I live in my area, but even my area, I would love to see it from 10 years ago to now. And I don't assume that it will be a improvement whatsoever. So tell me a little about this idea that you came up with in terms of using these pictures to show what Joburg has been through over the course of 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's certainly been a journey, right? So I don't consider myself a photojournalist, by any stretch of the imagination. I consider myself somebody who is patriotic to Johannesburg, and I will say being patriotic to Johannesburg is a lonely place because there aren't many of us out there. So I think the concept for me is something that I just stumbled upon, right? So I am a bit of a nerd in my personal capacity and kind of play around with Google Maps and love geography, and geography was certainly a strong point of mine. And of course, the Google Maps function, which has a timestamp. I think a lot of people haven't necessarily, caught wind of the fact that you can actually go back in time. And the concept for the page started in four ways, essentially. I'm not saying I live in four ways, but I was toggling around four ways on Google Maps, and I came across the patch of grass outside Four Ways Mall, and I realized that it had just turned into like an ad hoc taxi rank with no grass, no vegetation, just kind of just clay ground with taxis, and I toggled back to I think 2015 or 2014, and it was completely different, right? It was a beautifully manicured piece of grass with a sidewalk, and I saw just that stark contrast, and I actually tweeted that on my personal account, and that kind of blew up. And I thought to myself, yo, I think there's a space to create a standalone page for this, because the amount of real estate that Johannesburg covers and the amount of decay that the city's experienced, you'd have a lot of content there. So I started the page, and like you said, it kind of experienced a meteoric rise in a very, very short period of time. And I would say started a conversation, man. So that's kind of the genesis of Jozi versus Jozi.
So a lot of people ask me, oh, why do you do what you do? What was the idea when you started? And I always say, I have no idea what the idea was when I started. I just do stuff, right? Like I just feel like doing this, so I will do it. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. It evolves to something else entirely. So I'm not going to be one of those people that say, okay, what are like the long-term plan of this X account that showcases the degradation? But at the time you started it, no doubt you wanted views, you wanted people to see what you were wanting to do. In essence, what did you wish to show through this account? I know it probably became much more popular than you ever thought in your life, and I know that you were interviewed on the mainstream media channels as well. But long term, like, what do you want people to know about why you started this?
Yeah. So I think, going back to the love that I have of Johannesburg, I think we have lost sight of the critical importance that Johannesburg plays to South Africa's future and South Africa's fortunes, and I think the fortunes of the continent more broadly. I mean, Johannesburg is still by far the richest city in Africa. It might be usurped by Cape Town by 2030, but right now it's still the most important economic engine in Africa. And I thought that we need to shine a spotlight on the state of Johannesburg from all facets and all perspectives, right? It's one thing, news outlets running stories and interviewing politicians. It's another thing, the New York Times writing a really negative piece on Johannesburg. But I think there's various ways we can shine a spotlight, and I think Twitter and X is certainly a tool that's been underutilized, to evoke action. So I think, from my perspective, if Jozi versus Jozi can stimulate some sort of action, and I think political action political and civil action, I would say that's kind of first prize, and that's already started happening, right? So you've got a lot of politicians that are using the before and after framework to showcase what they do. You've got a lot of civil society groups that are using the content on the platform to showcase their own areas, right? Because they've been talking about their own areas. Homestead Park is one area. You've got Bellevue and that sort of thing. And that's kind of created a platform for them to communicate what's been happening in their own areas. So I think the objective of the account has actually already been met, if I'm honest with you, man. And it's just about what else can be done with it, and what downstream impacts is this going to create politically, and with the view, we've got elections next year, which are, I think, an inflection point in the history of Johannesburg. So yeah, man, that's kind of where the account should be going and what it should be doing.
Yeah, I fully agree with you about the elections next year and the inflection point thereof. I mean, I told everyone, just vote for Helen Zille, guys. I don't care, right? I don't care if you hate the DA, which I do for the most part, because they fired me for no reason. But I'm quite happy to put away my hate and stand for principle. Like, we need someone who's run a city before, who understands how it works, and who has a plan. And the only one who has that is Helen Zille, right? Irrespective of what you think, just bite the bullet and vote for Helen Zille, and I'll take that to the grave. And I don't care if people call me a sellout. I get called far worse for not being any of those things. So I agree in principle that next year's election is an inflection point for the city, and I think it will determine the future of the city, like something we have never ever seen before. But tell me a little bit about yourself. I don't want to dox you or anything like that, but what is your connection to Johannesburg? Is it somewhere that you grew up in? Is it somewhere that you lived in for a long time? Why do you love Jozi so much?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a good question, Roman, and I'm sure you'll resonate with a lot of what I say. But I'm a born and bred Joburger. Grew up in the West Rand. For all my sins, it's a very dusty part of Johannesburg. Went to school there. I went to a university. It's your own name, but it's I think we might have the same alma mater. It's one of the great institutions in the country, I must say. And look, I think from my perspective, Johannesburg has, I think, shaped my identity, right? It shapes a lot of people's identities here. We're a city of migrants. We are a city of people who are trying to get ahead in life, to create some sort of value for our families and protect our families. And Johannesburg has been that bastion for a lot of people for many years. And I think that's why I fell in love with Johannesburg, man. It's given me the best things in my life. It's given me my education. It's given me my friends. It's given me a lot of personal things that I cherish. I also just physically love the space, man. I think it's such an underrated physical space. I think if you go and stand at the wilds, for example, in Houghton, and you look at the vast expanse of Johannesburg, and you see Sandton and a waterfall, kind of those CBDs that have mushroomed over the past years, and then you look at our old CBD, and you look at a lot of the heritage kind of buildings there, man. It's a beautiful physical space, and it doesn't get credit for it. So I think my love for Johannesburg is multifaceted, man. But I think it's at a very high level. It's the importance and contribution that Johannesburg has to South Africa. Because ultimately, I love South Africa, but I'm a South African, and Johannesburg is really one of the main organs of the country. And that's the connection I have, man. From your perspective, Roman, I mean, you're a Joburger as well, right? I mean, I don't know what your experiences of the city. Do you share that same kind of affection and love, or am I just alone in the situation?
No, so I mean, I've been in Joburg all my life. I grew up in the south of Joburg, then I grew up in the East Rand. My parents divorced, so they moved to different areas. So I used to commute back and forth. So I know the East and the South very well. I currently live somewhere in the middle at the moment. But if I think about my formative years, right, I used to go to the Rain Club after school, not after school, after university, because my friend was a member there. Then I became a member of the Rain Club, and the Rain Club is like this beautiful traditional building. It's older than Johannesburg by 1 year, the club itself. And when you walk through it, like, there's just a sense of history. Like, every single important leader practically in the world has been through those doors, from Henry Kissinger to Nelson Mandela to any judge you can name on any court at any period of time since Joburg started. And once you get a sense of the history, and I read about the history as well, like how people came here to look for mines, like for mines, for diamonds and gold. Like just a few kilometers away now, under deep underground, under the skyscrapers that we see in the CBD. Like people were toiling there for like years and decades, and fighting and drinking and rebelling. And I mean, the history of Joburg is so wild. No one really understands it. No one really gets it. And I think it's just such a tragic shame that it is the only city in the world without a waterway, without an opera house. It shouldn't be a city. Yes, it is. Yet it is a great metropolis. And all the unique features no one cares about because people who are supposed to run it don't run it at all. And I just think it's such a great shame because the potential is just being stripped before our very eyes. And I want people to come to the city and make the best of their lives like I have, right? And my family has. But it's just not the same anymore. You can't come here and do that anymore. It's dying before our eyes. And I just find that very sad and very shameful, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And I think that's one of the main impetus for the account. But you talk about the history of Johannesburg and its founding. I think the one thing that's been a common thread throughout Johannesburg's history is that it's been a dodgy mining town. It started off as a dodgy mining town, and to an extent, it's still a dodgy mining town to this day. You've just replaced kind of formal mining with zamazamas and that sort of thing.
Correct.
But exactly. But I think there's been a certain hustle that has been a mainstay in the city for its entire history since the 1880s, whenever it was founded. And I think that's certainly something that people in Johannesburg should channel. I think we as Joburgers have lost our identity. I think the city's lost its identity. And that's because of many things, which I'm sure we'll touch on, like migration and that sort of thing. But I think there's a certain sense of identity that the city needs to get back, man, before any kind of political change happens and we start repairing the infrastructure in the city.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be great to start repairing something, right? Like you build your identity of what you know, not about what is the potential. I can't think of a single thing, if I may push back a bit, a single place where people became prouder before something was built. I think you have to show what you're doing, and then people become proud of what is happening or what is being done. So no, it is sad in that part. But what do you think drives, from your perspective, the leaders we have here, and I use leaders in inverted commas, I really think they just hate us, and they just hate excellence, and they hate helping people. And I don't know, there's like, just to me, you do get a sense of course, neglect, of course, theft, of course, all that stuff. But deep down, under all of that, there just seems to be willful hatred of people living here. Like I can't think of any other reason. You can't just say, oh, it's neglect or whatever the case might be, but they know the consequences. They can see the consequences every day. I mean, but they have to go into Joburg every day to go to work as councillors or whatever the case might be. So yeah, what drives such people in your mind?
I think, look, man, if we look at the demographics of the city, right, I think it reflects the demographics of the country at large. So I think Johannesburg is about 82% black, right? And one thing I've realized, and I think you might have mentioned this before, is if there's one thing politicians in South Africa and Johannesburg hate, is the upward mobility of black South Africans. So they want to suppress that at any turn, right? Because I think if you look at the data, the more money an individual makes, or just a black person in South Africa and a black person in Johannesburg, the less likely they are to vote for the biggest political party in the country, and the more likely they are to shift their votes to other political organizations. And so I think it's almost against the interests of the current political establishment to deliver services, to create a sense of upward mobility for Black South Africans in particular, for 82% of the city, because that actually might ruin their political hopes in the future. And of course, I mean, the ANC is tanking electorally anyway, but it feels as though like that hatred extends to, we're not necessarily going to do this because it's going to make sure that our electorate disappears, basically. I don't know if that's the sense you're getting in Roman, kind of what fuels these political elites.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a short-term game. I'm here for 5 years as the mayor. All my friends put me in positions, so I need to give them positions. And in the end, like we're going to privatize the upsides and then subsidize the downsides on every single person in the city. Like, it's just inherently evil and cruel. And I'm tired of just saying, oh, these people are just incompetent, or they're just greedy. No. Like, this is rapacious elitism of public goods. And my former libertarian self would say there's no such thing as public goods, but I live in a place where there is a functional park because we look after it. And you know what? That park is super functional for my family, for my dog walks, for if I just want to chill, I can go to the park and just read on the bench. And it's only there because we have agreed to take it under our wing, and we have agreed to sort of maintain it and upkeep it and all the rest of that. It costs us money, as we're not supposed to do it, but we do it. And having that park is a great important reason why I moved to this area where I am at the moment. We also have a high street, one of the only few walkable high streets in the city. This is a normal thing that happens in every single city, right, around the world. But here we treat it like an exclusive enclave, and I think that's gross. Like, more people should have walkable streets and walkable high streets and public parks where they don't get assaulted by someone on drugs or who's a failed zama and sets up a bush camp in the middle of a bloody rugby field. Like, people who allow that just hate us. It's as simple as that in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely, Roman. And don't describe your area too much, because there's that high street is in such short supply in Johannesburg, and people can just whittle it down to like Linden or Parkers. You know what I mean? But yeah, I completely get you, man. Do you know the things? I think there's a certain resentment from my side as somebody who loves Johannesburg, and I'm sure it's a resentment that's shared across the board. Is the administration in the city of Johannesburg, right, and the political parties that are in the administration have made basic service delivery look like brain surgery, right? Like this innovation, like this fourth industrial revolution, right? And it's something that the DA, for example, are kind of using to their benefit, right? Because the DA are in international standards, a very ordinary political organization that just delivers the most basic fundamental things, right? That wouldn't be something that would get them votes elsewhere. And I think that's the resentment on my side is they've made basic service delivery look like some weird innovation, man.
Yeah. And do they tell you how great they are at it? It's and that's what frustrates me. But enough doxing. Enough doxing. Kwanzaa said they've noticed that Joburg has the most fluid black electorate in the country. Absolutely, right? It's the most fractured electorate by far. That's why we have all sorts of parties here that don't exist anywhere else in the country. And you know what? I'm going to be a bit controversial, but I think if you want to make in the past, after 94, if you wanted to make cash or have a middle class life as a black person, Joburg was literally the only place to do it.
Correct.
And even that's dying away now. If you go to Cape Town, it's too small, too cliquey. Durban, the port's dying, so nothing else happens there. Limpopo and Mpumalanga, if you work on a mine, maybe, but you're not going to be an entrepreneur over there. Joburg was the place for that, and like that has just disappeared now. So now, if you want to be upwardly mobile, black, independent, middle class, get your kids to private schools or have a medical aid, I think Joburg is not the place for that anymore, and that's like such a shocking indictment on the so-called governance we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that should be Johannesburg's like main value proposition, is its offer to Black South Africans and its offer to, and by extension, the whole of South Africa, right? Because I think upward mobility of Black South Africans has downstream and upstream impacts on society at large. And that kind of disappearing from Johannesburg is incredibly disappointing. I would just disagree in the sense that I think there is still an opportunity for Black South Africans to get a certain economic kind of foothold in society in Johannesburg that may not necessarily exist in a Cape Town and a Durban, for example. I still think there is the big corporations that are still headquartered in Johannesburg, of course, with one leg out and probably considering kind of migrating down south, but they're still there, right? The Johannesburg Stock Exchange is still in Johannesburg, and I think it's not too late to ensure that this semigration that Jordan Hill Lewis and Helen Ziller talk about isn't a semigration of Black South Africans, right? Because when they talk about semigration, they're not talking about Black South Africans. If you look at the data, Johannesburg still gets the most money in the country, and I still think there's a way in which we can ensure that skilled Black South Africans stay in Johannesburg. But like you've said, I think the time is running out, and that's why 2026 is such a critical moment.
So speaking of 2026, have political parties reached out to you based on your Twitter account? And if so, you don't have to dox them, so to speak, but have they tried to sort of co-opt you or offer you something or want more advice? Anything like that has happened to you?
Yeah, man. No. A multitude of political parties have contacted me, have DM'd me, with the exception of one, which the largest political party in the country is the only one that hasn't necessarily reached out to me.
Of course.
Yeah, of
Not a
course.
surprise.
But yeah, 100%. But I've seen, the mayor of Johannesburg has finally followed the account. So I think his newfound appreciation for Twitter has resulted in following the account. But yeah, there's been a number of political parties that have reached out to me, that have wanted to collaborate. And I think for me, it's still something that I think keeping JozivsJozi something that's as neutral as it can be. I mean, it's difficult for it to be neutral in such a politically charged situation. But yeah, I find it heartening that political parties have reached out. Some of these political parties I personally don't particularly like, but sometimes you need rats that can catch mice, or however that kind of saying
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah. No, I sort of, I can certainly understand that. But I mean, I think we give the mayor of Joburg a lot of grief, Dada Morero, because he came in. Remember when he came in? He said, "Listen, don't expect much from me." It's like, I'm just here. Like, I don't know if I can do anything. Like, hey, maybe I can, maybe I can't. I don't know. I was like, you know what? It's so nice to have an honest politician for once. And he stuck true to his word. Like nothing much has happened under his watch, except they paved a tar road with paving, and I don't think that's going to last terribly long. But at least they did something in that regard. So we shouldn't be too harsh on the guy. He promised nothing, which is already like a step up from promising a lot and under delivering.
Yeah. No. Honestly, I do think he gets a lot of grief, and to be honest with you, I mean, he's been in office for, I think it's probably about a year and a half now. And I think if you chart his odyssey to the mayorship, I think it's been one that's been cloaked in a lot of tragedy, right? I think three or four predecessors have died in office. Jeff Makubo, Joreli, Matongo, Mpho Marane. All of these guys tragically died, right? And Dada Morero's found himself in this position, kind of fifth in line. He seems like an ordinary, nice guy. I'm sure if you have a chat with him on the side of the road, he's probably a good guy. And so, but I do think that there's inherently going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny that anybody who gets into that office, again, it's the metro with the biggest budget, I would imagine, probably in Africa. And so I think, if you're there for 6 weeks or you're there for 5 years, like Park Stau was, I think you need to be scrutinized. And it's unfortunate for Dada that he comes into office with Johannesburg being in the worst shape of its life. Really. So yeah, to an extent, I feel for him, man. I'm not gonna lie to you.
That makes one of us. That makes one of us. I just said he was honest. I didn't say he was good. But we can agree to disagree in that particular regard. I mean, the essence is, right? The essence is the budget is 70, 80 billion rand. More people are going off grid. A lot more people are not paying. The increases are coming from Eskom. They're coming from water. They're not coming from Joburg itself, other than the rate increases with the bullshit valuation propositions. And we've seen this game played out before, where you have Detroit in the 60s, which is the singing, dancing, mega city of America, and now it's nowhere. Why? Because they slowly run out of money, then they slowly increase the taxes, then more people flee, so they increase the taxes again. People don't pay, those people flee. And at the end of the day, it's a vicious cycle of just not having enough money, and a lot of it is blown on bullshit for the most part. And that's where Joburg was 10 years ago, and nothing has been done to try fix it. Ironically, the thing that can fix it is maintenance and infrastructure, but they don't actually have money for maintenance and infrastructure, but they got money for salaries only, but they can't fire anyone because of the unions. So you got this toxic mix that just, if you follow the democratic process to run a city, you're not going to save Joburg. If you go over and above the democratic process and with a healthy dose of ruthlessness, there is a chance.
There is. No, there is, of course, Roman. It would be nice to get a sense of kind of what you think some of those interventions would be in a little bit more granularity. But I think from my perspective, right, and this is the question that inherently this account gets a lot is, what is it going to take to fix Johannesburg? And I think for me, you could bucket it into two things, right? There's
Mhm.
certain things that you do from an internal operating environment perspective, and then there's the external operating environment point of view. So internally, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you can do around lawlessness, broken window policing. I think there's certain playbooks that you can emulate from other cities, right? Like New York in the 1980s under Rudy Giuliani and that sort of thing. And then also things that you can do to drive more accountability, electoral thresholds, for example. But I think there's also external things that need to be dealt with that are a little bit more systemic, right? I think Johannesburg being the economic magnet that it's always been for the continent, inherently you're going to get migration from the rest of the continent, right? Especially if our neighboring countries are increasingly impoverished and politically unstable. So Johannesburg is going to pay the
Yep.
brunt of that. Johannesburg's the first major city that you encounter after you cross the border from Botswana or from Zimbabwe, right? Something that Cape Town, for example, has physical and geographic, protection against. And so I think it's in our interest to, for example, secure our borders or, ensure that the region is stable. There's a lot of interventions, man, but they're just so wide ranging. I don't know from your perspective, Roman, what kind of interventions do you think would kind of cut through the mess?
Well, none of them are constitutional, if that's what you're asking. Based on the fact that, in actual fact, a lot of these political figures, the mayors, the MMCs or MECs or whatever you want to call them, they actually don't have that much power. They have a budget and they need to make sure that it's allocated and no one steals. They already fail at that. But there is a hugely entrenched bureaucracy in Joburg. I think there are 70,000 people working for the city of Joburg in some capacity. I think there has been an attempt to privatize maintenance and to privatize infrastructure, which has always been a nightmare. So you need to sort of insource those things as much as possible. Everyone on the timeline and in the chat are going to melt just now by me saying that. But I remember reading back in the day, the Nats had a policy that a municipality must be as self sufficient as possible. Right, so you fix the electricity, you fix the water issues. If there's a trip, you basically have someone on salary to fix those things. Trevor Manuel came in and said, no, no, basically we should just outsource a lot of these things because that's what capitalism is about, right? We outsource our problems to the best people at the cheapest price, that sort of shit. And then you end up with a tender system for like just replacing a light bulb is impossible because you need 3 quotes and you can only buy 1,000 light bulbs at a time because that's the budget. You can't just go fix a freaking light bulb because that's how the system is based. So you actually need to insource all sorts of things to make that a reality. Number 2, you need to cut you need to have austerity within hiring practices and within the employment of City of Joburg. There's lots of middle people, admin people that can be automated away, that can be done away with, and productivity will increase. So the goal there is to put everyone's salary, have a 6-month fund for each person. Say, listen, we're going to fire you here 6 months. If not, go to the CCMA. They'll say 6 months anyway, so we'll have the money already for you. As the cost of doing business, just put however much it is, 10,000 people, 6 months salary in a fund, and just pay them out to leave. You're going to just save yourself a lot of headache going forward. And then number 3, I mean, whatever happened to visible policing, for goodness sake?
Yeah.
Right? We see it when G20 is here. And that's why I'm so angry, because we can see it happen. The World Cup had happened. G20 had happened. Whenever there's something important, visible policing is there. Everything's cut. Everything's maintained. Everything's fairly nice. It can be done, but there's like no repercussions not doing it. So you just need to be like completely ruthless as a manager and have like very high KPIs and just run it like a business at the end of the day. Like, that's how you have to do it. But for the things you can't control, like immigration, like border control, like all these things that have direct impacts, you have to evict 10,000 people because then the NGOs can't take you to court for each particular case. You just have to do it as a blitz rather than surgically. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's all about, do you have the iron in you to actually do it? That's the test.
Yeah, That's it, and the political will, right? So I think that's kind of a big thing. I mean, there's a few things that I want to pick up that you had mentioned there. I think the size of the Johannesburg workforce, or the Johannesburg administration workforce, is incredibly bloated, right? But I think this points into a culture of people looking at public administration and politics as a means to just purely make a living, right? So
Of course.
you've got a lot of instances where people that work in these spheres of government would be unemployable in other sectors, and yet they command really high salaries in the city of Johannesburg, in the provincial government, in the national government, for example. And I think that's a culture there that we need to tackle head on. And try and get some of that skilled labor and skilled capital that is in the these glass structures in Sandton and Cape Town. We need to bring them back into the state and bring them back into local government. But again, that you need a sense of drive and identity there for that to happen. I think something else that hasn't been touched on. Go ahead, Ruben.
No, go ahead. No, I was going to agree with you.
Yeah, cool. I think another thing that I think we need to open a conversation around is Johannesburg in its current form, right? I believe that it's too large to govern in its current as a current entity, right? So I know we've got different regions, region A, B, and all of that. But I think if you look at cities across the world that are of a similar population and geographic size as Johannesburg, there is some sort of devolution and breaking it down into districts or boroughs that self-govern, that are allocated certain responsibilities around certain levels of service delivery. I think we need to start exploring that phenomena. I think it is insane to me that Lenasia and Midrand are part of the same city, and the same one mayor is presiding over these two areas that are in different parts of the province. I think that's a conversation that needs to be opened up.
It's completely crazy, and I cannot agree with you more. Someone actually came to me a while ago, and like, the way to save Joburg is to break it up. And he showed me a map from 1970 something or 1980 something, and Joburg was actually 4 different regions, and each one had a mayor, each one had a committee, each one had various things that they could do. But it's completely true. So I grew up in the south, right? Walkerville. So next to me was Soweto, Lenasia. What else? Vereeniging was close by, next to Meyersdal. That, of course, Besonia. That whole area has, just by itself, 5-6 million people, right? Just by itself, that's already a mid-sized city in any reasonable country. Why are the people there share the same budget as someone in Waterfall City that's 50 kilometers north? Completely different context, completely different timeline, completely different expectation of what needs to be done. Like, Soweto should be as independent as possible, along with the whole southern region. The center of Joburg, completely independent. The west, the east, independent. The north, independent. Centurion should be a city on its own, and include Midrand in it. Like, it's insane to me, actually, that you can have one budget for 12 million people based on the surface area larger than most countries in sort of Eastern Europe. It's crazy. We should
crazy.
actually devolve.
I completely agree with you, and I think what we've done now is we've democratized decay, right? Where if the entire city shares a budget, you give no onus to people, to communities that can actually that can service their own environments. You don't give them the autonomy that they need. Because if there was a situation where we had to, quote unquote, not necessarily break up Johannesburg, but maybe give a little bit more agency to specific regions within Johannesburg, you could channel financial resources to the parts of the city that need it the most, right? So, for example, the community of Waterfall or Sunning Hill or Morningside, if they were given the autonomy to cut their own grass, for example, to deliver certain basic services for themselves, security, which I'm sure they do now, you could channel some of those funds to the areas that are a lot more dilapidated and that need the money. So there's an upside to doing that. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I think there's a political party out there that needs to bring that to the table, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it's such a good point. I mean, what did the south of Joburg need in 1994 compared to what did the Joburg CBD need in 1994? The Joburg CBD just needed to carry on, right? Be safe, sweep the streets, fix the potholes. That's all that needed, right? Maybe new zoning to build new buildings, but really simple stuff that any city can do. But if you go to Soweto, or you go to where I grew up in Walkerville, right? And back then there was nothing; it was just farmland. There you need roads, you need zoning, you need piped water, you need all sorts of things to happen before you can actually develop those areas. So to have the same master plan and the same budget for these two different areas is just that's just beyond absurd. I fully agree with you. I really think the metro system has been a complete disaster and something that needs to be repealed as soon as possible, and not just for Joburg. I suspect for most metros in this country.
Yeah, I completely agree. And probably to take that a step further, right? And I know a lot of the solutions that we're bringing to the table now kind of rely on the constitutional framework and rely on kind of politicians and the turkey walking itself to the dinner table. But that's a
Yeah.
different conversation altogether. I think something else that probably needs to happen, and for Johannesburg specifically, right? And I think it needs to be insulated from the Gauteng provincial government as well. And what I mean by that, I think there needs to be a direct line between Johannesburg and the national government. And Johannesburg needs to be seen as, it needs to be recognized as you know, as a province in and of itself. And I don't want to use the word province, right? But I think we need, especially in the short term, we probably need a national ministry that just focuses on turning Johannesburg around. I think that's how important it is to the economic fortunes of the country. So I think, the provincial government as a concept as well, I think is something that isn't required. I think provincial government, its only mandate really is probably health. But outside of that, it's either a local government issue or a national government issue. So I think we need to clarify that relationship between the state and Johannesburg. I know Cyril's kind of mentioned, a working group and that sort of thing, but that's neither here nor there. We need something a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like his presidency. Lots of working groups and no working things. Only thing that are working are group projects. Yeah, no, we just need a leader. We just need like someone with a spine and iron in them to just say, this is what's going to happen. If you don't want to do it, fuck off then. Excuse my language. But I see it work in real life. It works in most areas, especially in politics. So Rowan says Joburg isn't actually that big to be considered it's a small city in China. It's a lack of will, and that's the issue. I completely agree, but I don't know if we will ever get a skills issue without, excuse my language, totalitarianism, right? Because let's be frankly really honest with us. The state has been a purveyor of the black middle class, right? There was a 5-year moratorium after 1994. The whites had to leave, and the new black civil servants came into effect after that. And it's been a job creator, right? And it's created the black middle class, and that's perfectly fine, and that's good, and whatever the case might be. But there was never any standards set upon these people. Some have grown into the role, some do really good jobs, some do really terrible jobs, but there's never been an overarching duty to the job. It's now that I'm here, I can't get fired, so I'll just do what I want. And listen, in the same position, I might have the same idea about that particular job, but unless you have a set of standards that are ruthlessly enforced, you're never going to get that skills issue. So maybe it's best just to break it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big misstep in 1994, both at a national and local level, was I think the period of handover, as it were, from a skills handover. That being said, I think should have been extended a considerable period of time. So I think we could have created an environment where people with the skill, the technical skill to oversee big cities like Johannesburg and countries like South Africa, I think we're kind of retained into that position until such a time that we've capacitated the next generation of administrators, and I think that's something that we didn't necessarily consider. It's obviously a very sensitive topic in terms of
Sure.
our apartheid past and that sort of thing. So I can understand how history's played out the way that it has, but again, I think there's certain things that we could have done in 1994 to make sure that we had kind of a skilled technocratic workforce in the city of Joburg, but in the state more broadly.
Yeah, yeah, and look at every nation that wanted to be great, from South Korea to any of the industrialized nations today, right? They had the same thing, this sort of infrastructural development, state enforced progress in these areas. So the idea is not stupid at all, but it has to be very well managed, and that's of course is something that that isn't the case in this country of ours we call South Africa. I don't know if you read Helen Zille's autobiography rather, where she states that in Cape Town it took 10 years just to actually right the ship. And then after she left, that's when Cape Town actually started to be treated like a normal city with a normal mayor undergoing the usual things cities are supposed to do. But it took 10 years just to, get the budgets to break even, to pay off all the debts of the city. All sorts of things had to happen before they could actually function as a city. And I suspect Joburg is going to take actually much longer if you follow that same democratic process. And by then, I don't think there will be much left. But if you don't follow the democratic process, if you just use raw power, it could be done quite quicker.
Yeah, look, I think Johannesburg is definitely more of a generational fix than other examples that we've seen. But I just want to, I want to double click on the whole kind of Cape Town comparison, because I think Helen Ziller and I have a lot of I revere her political history, and personally I hope she does well in next year's elections, just as somebody who can actually steady the ship. But I think if you had to look at Cape Town, right, and its political history and the governments that have presided over the city. So Cape Town in 1994, and let me say the Western Cape in 1994, the Nats, the NP won the province, right?
Correct.
And they won it until 1999. And the National Party, I think, ran the city of Cape Town until around 2000 or 2001. And I think the ANC took over for 5 years until 2006, when Helen Zille ascended to her mayorship. So if you look at Cape Town, and I think it's been around for 300 or 400 years, has only been governed by the ANC for 5 years of its 300-year history, right? I would argue that the Democratic Alliance and Helen Zille inherited a lot like a functioning city compared to whoever's going to inherit Johannesburg next year, right? So when Helen
Completely agree.
Zille, absolutely, when Helen Zille kind of mentioned that, Cape Town was broken when she took it over, I think that's a bit disingenuous. I think that's been used for political currency, which is fine. I'll probably do the same thing, right? But you cannot compare Cape Town and Johannesburg and its political history. I think demographics are a big thing as well, right? Cape Town is obviously the only city in the country that isn't majority black. That if you had to take the white electorate and the colored electorate in Cape Town, I think that's kind of what gives the DA its majority. And of course, demographics have a lot to do with development in the country, unfortunately, and that's just how the country's been designed from an apartheid perspective. So Cape Town has a lot of kind of structural things that aid its development that Johannesburg unfortunately doesn't have, right? And I think that's just something that when people compare kind of Cape Town, where it was in 2006 versus where Joburg is in 2025, I think it's a comparison that really can't be made, if I'm honest with you.
I agree. I agree. The only comparison is that the DA in this regard did take something that was certainly not as bad, but has made it apparently more functioning. A lot of people actually do disagree with me on this. I think it is more functional objectively than any other city, and it bears out in the Auditor General's report, it bears out in the economic reports and things like that. But again, Cape Town is a provincial city in the middle of Germany. Like, have you ever thought about a city called, I don't even know, a provincial city in the middle of Germany? But like that's its size and budget. Like it's not a very interesting city. It's beautiful because it's got the mountains, and that's about it. Joburg is a beast, right? Joburg has been an economic zone where there hasn't been entrenched Afrikaner interests.
Yeah.
It's one of the few cities where there wasn't Afrikaner interest. There was Jewish and Anglo interests, right? A lot of the landlords were Jewish and or English origins. So that's Joburg has always been the economic zone, and economic zones are very different. You can't rely on the geography of the place. You can't rely on a lot of things. You have to just literally rely on the physical practicalities of what you can do. And that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, of course. Look, I think it's, nobody can argue that Cape Town has become by far the most functional city in South Africa. I think there's a lot of people on Twitter who want to make these really weird arguments that, look at Khayelitsha versus look at, Santon, for example, where you should be saying,
Yeah.
look at Tembisa and look at Khayelitsha. I think that's more of an apt comparison. But I think, the DA, and nobody should take away the work that they've done to create infrastructure, both political and physical infrastructure, that is going to carry that city for a long time, and they've definitely improved it. But I think the beast that is Johannesburg, like you mentioned, is something very different, and I think it's going to take a different skill set to turn it around. And I don't know if there's a political party out there that has both the technical and the political nous to turn Johannesburg around. I mean, the DA could argue they've got the technical nous, and if you look at Cape Town, you can't disagree. But I don't know if they've got the political acumen. I don't know if they've got the allies to form a coalition next year that gives them 50% plus one. Johannesburg is an interesting city, like you said, Roman. It used to be called Joburg back in the day because, like you said, the Afrikaans interests weren't here. The Nats actually hated.
Correct.
Yeah, the Nats actually hated Johannesburg because it was a city of mavericks, and a city where they didn't necessarily have their claws in it. And so it's an interesting city, and I think it's going to be interesting to see, who takes over next year. And I don't know if do you have any predictions, Roman? If somebody had to give you a crystal ball, kind of what happens next year?
I think the DA will be the biggest party. I'm not too sure. I can't give you numbers. I don't know the numbers, but just as a trend, I think the DA will be the biggest party. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it'll be a DA ANC coalition based on the numbers. The PA is at maximum 5%, Freedom Front Plus maximum 5%, Action SA 2%. The rest don't matter. EFF, I think, is going to crumble to 5% or below. So I think it will just be a mini GNU in Joburg, but this time the DA will be the bigger party. So do they have the political ruthlessness to just tell the ANC what to do? I hope so. But it could resemble the Government of National Unity in KwaZulu-Natal, where the ANC, IFP, and DA run that place, and the ANC has a very minor role. I think they got the MEC for like tourism or something, and that seems to be holding. Or transport, sorry, which is a big position, but not as big as the others, and that seems to be holding for some reason. So, but there's no IFP in Joburg to be the counterforce. So we will see. If Helen wants to become mayor, she has to do it through the ANC. Based on what I can see right now, those are the trends that I see. I don't think she can. She'd rather go with the ANC as a single partner than have 5 partners under 5% who may stab her in the back later on. That's just my feeling about it.
Yeah. Interesting perspective. I think what separates the kind of Joburg Gauteng reality to the national reality is that you've got a variable called Panyaza Lesufi, who I think has shown that he has a certain ruthlessness that a lot of other ANC political leaders don't have, and he has a certain hatred for the Democratic Alliance. I mean, I think that's clear as day. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. If he even allows a conversation with the DA to happen, as wounded as the ANC might be in Johannesburg next year. But I think if he can cobble together a coalition with, again, Al Jama and a host of other parties, as unstable as it can be, I think he would find that a lot more desirable than a DA coalition. So that's certainly something to look at.
Yeah, I agree with you, but also let's not forget the DA voted for Panyaza Lesufi to be the premier of Gauteng, right? And then he stabbed him in the back, and nothing happened, right? Like nothing happened. Like that's what's so infuriating. Like you voted for the guy, and now you're like, oh, Panyaza is illegitimate. No, you voted for him on the promise of something that didn't materialize, and then nothing happened when you lost. Like that's why it pains me. Like just be ruthless political operators, for goodness sake. Like make life for Panyaza so difficult that he resigns, or that he brings you into the fold, or something. No. Oh, he betrayed us. Let's go cry. Okay, well, I thought this was politics, not a school playground.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the Democratic Alliance don't have that political ruthlessness, right? They just don't have it in their DNA. I think obviously you've had conversations with the leader of that political party, and I'm sure you
not recently.
Well, not recently, but you've maybe had some correspondence. You've had some correspondence with it, yeah. Yeah, but I think that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest weakness, not necessarily for the DA. I don't want to make this a DA centric conversation.
Sure.
But I think that's just that's an issue across the political spectrum. Is I don't think there's a political party that's as politically ruthless as the ANC. I think if you look at parties like the DA, they operate in a reality that they wish existed and not the one that actually does exist. And I think they need to bring
100%.
themselves to reality and say, you need to have political dark arts here to win in South African politics. And that's something that the DA, unfortunately, they've got a soft underbelly. They are outfoxed by the ANC at every given turn. So I think South Africa probably might need an alternative to the DA that has kind of that technical credibility, but that can also have, something of a dark arts mindset.
Yeah, you need the DA technically and the PA ruthlessness attached to it. That's a good combination.
Great combination.
But yeah, great combination. But Gayton as well, like he's winning by elections because he can actually go there and entice people to vote for him. But at a national level, you can't go to every single bloody polling station, so he won't grow, past 5%, which is great for him. But yeah. Anyway, at the end of the day, Josie, I think from my side and from what I'm seeing, a lot of institutions are being built that are defending Joburg against state predation.
Yeah.
Some of them are like wokey shit, which I think is so stupid. There's others that are just like, no, we're just going to like build stuff now, and we're not going to ask for permission. It's starting off small. There's a park in a suburb far away that's been completely fenced off through private money. They built a paddle court in the public park. Everyone's allowed in and out, but they close the gates at night to prevent people from sleeping over and things like that. And listen, that park is fantastic. All they did was ask for permission from Joburg, and the permission was granted under the ANC government. By the way, they asked for permission under the DA government, and the DA government says no, it's illegal. So there's ways and means to justify having things depending on who's in charge. My concern is if the DA is in charge, they will actually shut off all these private initiatives because it's not their jurisdiction. Whereas the ANC is like, yeah, we don't actually care. Do what you want, as long as we don't have to do it. But I think the future might be these private institutions that are just going to have to come up with ways to fix reservoirs, fix potholes, and the only issue is they can't focus on long-term infrastructure because they don't have hundreds of billions of rands at their disposal to do that and get paid for it.
Yeah. I think spot on, right? I think privatization and devolution, fortunately or unfortunately, based on whatever ideology you have, is certainly something in the short term that will have to be prioritized. I think the communities that can protect and service themselves should be given the autonomy to do so. And I think it's heartening to hear that permission was granted by the ANC. It probably gives them one less thing to do. It's not like they do much anyway. So I completely agree with you. I think that long term, if you had to horizon scan and just think long term in terms from an infrastructure perspective, I think that's where the make or break of Johannesburg is going to be, right? And that's why we need to get the political reality right. I think you need to get the political will and the right kind of political actors around the table. And I'm hoping that you get to a scenario where, Joburg gets to a point, and I think it's probably there now, where I think even the African National Congress and the people that might be benefiting from its degradation kind of see that there's more upside to turning it around for themselves. And I hope that kind of reality kind of happens at some point.
Yeah, I think you're under the correct impression. I just don't think they know how to actually do it. If you speak to them, we all want the same thing, right? We all want to save Joburg and whatever the case might be, but I don't think there's any real thought into how to actually practically do it within the ambit of this thing called the PFMA and all the municipal bylaws and regulations and all this crap that actually prevents a lot of stuff from really happening. So yeah, I think we're going to be stuck for a while. Let's see what Helen can do in a time. Someone this morning called me and said Helen can actually do so many things based on these, just by having a normal budget. If you just have a normal budget and it's voted on, you can do so many things. So I'll trust his judgment on this. He's not a DA person, by the way. So we'll wait and see. But for now, I think the advice to everyone watching and listening is like just state-proof yourself as much as possible until we can figure out how the hell we're going to fix it properly.
Yeah, wise words, Roman. Absolutely.
I'm glad we agree, Josie. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to chat about that we haven't spoken about yet?
This has been a no, it's been a very lively and fruitful discussion, Roman. So I think we've covered everything, and yeah, I hope your viewers have enjoyed the chat, and they shouldn't lose faith in Johannesburg, man. It's too big to fail, truly.
Yes, no, I agree. I agree. There's some days we you just think, oh, maybe I should just go move to Cape Town, and then you see Cape Town on Twitter and the way they talk to each other, like, no, actually, I'm staying right here. Not going there. Not going there at all. I'd rather move to Bloemfontein. Life is a bit easier over there. All right, Josie, thank you so much, and thank you for all that you do. And I think you have changed the way people look at Joburg, and I think maybe in some way, I don't want to blow smoke up your backside, but I think in some way you have determined the future of Johannesburg, and it's just based on a timeline of what it was 10 years ago and what it is today. And maybe we should just go back to what it was 10 years ago as a start. So
Absolutely.
kudos to you. Great idea. And let's see where it leads to.
Absolutely, Roman. Yeah, man. Thanks for the platform, and yeah, thanks for everything you do, and congratulations on this platform. Cheers.
No, thank you very much, Josie. For everyone watching, thank you so much. Please, if you enjoyed that, subscribe and all the rest of it, and follow JozivsJozi. It's inactive at the moment, but I'll put the link down below, and you can see for yourself what we are up against all together as citizens of this great city and great country. Have a good rest of the afternoon. Speak soon.